Hello and welcome. You're watching Nimasa this week. My name is Iretiola Doyle and I'm your regular host. Now, our focus on the program this week goes to the very heart of Nimasa's mandate, shipping development. The following short preview takes into cognizance the humble beginnings of merchant shipping, the forces that have held it down for so long, and the current efforts being made by Nimasa to reposition Nigeria for greater participation in international maritime trade.
Loosely defined, a ship is a floating vessel of trade or interaction in whatever form between individuals, corporate bodies, or countries or nation-states. From the earliest of times, man has always deployed ships to pursue various interests close to his heart, especially in the areas of warfare and exchange of goods. At the very beginning of the history of sailing, there was an overriding passion among countries to explore new territory and therefore new markets for their goods and services. The end of the age of sailing has, however, seen the advent of ships as large, buoyant marine vessels. Wikipedia observes that ships are generally distinguished from boats based on size and cargo or passenger capacity. The large, buoyant marine vessels of today are not only motor-driven and rigged with the latest state-of-the-art navigation equipment, it remains a fact that they are still being increasingly deployed with varying levels of sophistication in military campaigns and international commerce. But the stark reality facing today's global community is that competition on the high seas for economic opportunities among countries has unwittingly opened the door for exploitation by parties who have less than noble intentions. While some of these interests engage in commerce like everyone else, cutting all kinds of corners in a desperate bid to reap from where they hardly sowed, others go all out to launch a campaign of terror, blackmail and armed robbery on international waters. The offshoot has been the rise and rise in the cost of doing business on the seas for those who legitimately seek for ways of safeguarding their business interests. Commercial vessels on international waters, which by 2007 numbered nearly 35,000, carried 7.4 billion tons of cargo. There is, however, a consensus among maritime watchers that higher figures in this respect would have been recorded without the unwelcome presence of sea robbers and pirates. In spite of these hostile interventions, trade between countries of the world has survived on the sheer strength of will on the part of those who genuinely believe that criminality should not be allowed to predominate global issues. Global shipping handles the bulk of transportation of goods between countries. The story remains largely unchanged in respect of trade around the territorial waters of individual nations. Owing to that fact, the challenge before different levels of maritime authority becomes the continuous development and enhancement of instruments of seaborne trade everywhere in the world. Here in Nigeria, at the vanguard of this campaign is the Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency Nimasa through the instrumentality of its Shipping Development Department. Nimasa has done a lot with its shipping development function since inception in 2007, none more so under the present Director General, Ziakede Patrick Akpobolokemi. Under Mr. Akpobolokemi's stewardship, the agency has also opened up the space for the enhancement of local capacity regarding the control of domestic trade. This it is actively doing through the objective implementation of its cabotage function. The dynamics of sea trade, foreign or local, are basically the same, and with that at the back of its mind, Nimasa pursues an integrated program of empowering local ship owners with a view to affording them a foothold, which could also be consolidated upon for participation in foreign trade in the near future. Finally, Nimasa, as the sole regulatory body of Nigeria's maritime sector, undertakes the registration and certification of ships. The triple functions of shipping development, cabotage implementation and registration of ships by Nimasa, therefore, collectively articulate and seeks to galvanize the efforts of government to keep Nigeria apace with global trends in the maritime industry.
Now, Nimasa's shipping development efforts are well documented and carry with them the sheer weight of the mandate, namely cabotage. Registration of ships in Nigeria also lends a certain legitimacy to vessels doing business on Nigerian waterways. Our next feature projects the thoughts of Nimasa officers in charge of the different responsibilities.
A situation where vessels are being attacked in our waterways or in the Nigerian maritime domain can no longer be tolerated.
The Director General of Nimasa reaffirming what has become something of a personal holy grail, namely that his tenure should be assessed principally on the yardstick of how much he is able to deliver with the present comprehensive assault on piracy on Nigerian waters. Ziakede Patrick Akpobolokemi and his team at the country's apex maritime regulatory authority are in no doubt that a meaningful realization of the mandate entrusted to them would remain a pipe dream for as long as the freedom of the seas is not guaranteed. For a more objective analysis of what has remained a constant threat to the development of Nigerian shipping, the Nimasa DG believes that sharp practices among some of the stakeholders should also come in for blame.
Shipping companies also are not helping matters in some regards. For instance, ship-to-ship transfers must be made known to Nimasa as the regulatory body. This is the apex regulatory body in the maritime sector. A situation where shipping companies would engage in ship-to-ship transfer without notification and authorization from Nimasa should not be encouraged. We also have the problem of midstream discharges of cargo without prior notice to Nimasa. Even for purposes of revenue collection, you know how this can be dangerous to the government, to Nimasa. A situation also where shipping companies allow more than one agent to husband a vessel at the same time is not also too good. Also worrisome is the manipulation of manifest and under-declaration of cargo. Oftentimes, we see shipping companies manipulate manifest and under-declare their cargo for purposes of paying a small amount of money. That is huge economic loss to the government.
Genuine leaders, they say, should always show the way forward, and in this, Mr. Akpobolokemi would not shy away, even as he outlines the consequences of not heeding this clarion call.
We are not saying our brothers from the West, from Asia, from Europe, etc., should not come and do business here, because the world is a global village. We cannot be at higher land. Some supply logistics jobs that ought to be given to the indigenous people are not given to them. If jobs are not created for our people, even our brothers from the West, from Europe, Asia, you will not have peace to do your business here.
Discoveries in recent times have shown a disturbing trend whereby an increasing number of Nigerians are regularly being indicted for colluding with foreign elements who hold little or no stake in the future of the country in perpetrating these regrettable acts. Captain Waridi Eniso is the acting director for shipping development at Nimasa, a man who has spent a considerable chunk of his professional life at sea in different capacities as both a seaman and law enforcement officer. The captain outlines further challenges confronting the development of Nigeria's shipping industry. He also expanded on the issue of economic sabotage, which he says has over the years robbed the country of much needed revenue, in addition to reducing the true value of our shipping development potentials by almost 50%.
One thing I can tell you is that the 2003 figure of $25 million is probably an estimate taken without maritime domain awareness. In my own assessment, Nigeria's maritime, earnings should be more than double that if we know what is happening in our waters. There are a lot of illegal activities happening in Nigerian waters, which rob us of a lot of that particular money I just mentioned earlier. One of it is crude oil theft, which we are still working on seriously, and hopefully with the backing of our federal government, we'll be able to solve that, we'll be able to bring it down to a barest minimum.
Time and time again, Nimasa has been unequivocal in emphasizing the importance of capacity building to its efforts at keeping Nigeria pace with global trends in shipping and commerce. In all things though, nature abhors vacuum, a fact that makes it imperative for the country to acquire shipbuilding and maintenance facilities necessary for sustaining the country's international trade profile.
Shipyards are virtually unavailable. Dockyards are virtually unavailable. We've presented position papers to government to create incentives for people who want to invest in dockyards and shipyards. For now, what we are doing is Nimasa is coming up with its own dockyard at the shipyard that has been approved, and we've started preliminary works. Once it is fully through, we are fully through with the project, we're going to hand it over to private people to manage, and that is already ongoing.
With the growing volume of shipping, especially local shipping in Nigeria, and Nigeria's quest to maintain a very, very high standard, which ensures that these vessels are dry docked when they are due, Niger Dock cannot cope. Nimasa has embarked on building this dock to be able to reduce this particular pressure. So we've advised quite a fair bit of experts to also go into the use of floating docks, in which case you can always pull your dock to the environment you want to be able to address the volume of ships, provided that you operate in sheltered waters. Now, there are also new innovations inside the dry docking business, which are self-docking docks, because as we have found out, or not necessarily found out, it's a requirement also for the floating docks to be docked after a while, because they are stable in one particular location for a time. But the self-docking docks are able to dock themselves. So we wouldn't need to tow a floating dock to a foreign country to be fixed or repaired or docked before it comes back into our waters.
Considering the capital-intensive nature of this project, what is the possibility of the private sector easily accessing them?
There is a CVFF fund, which is the Cabotage Vessel Financing Fund. It covers things like this. It's a maritime fund, as you well know. So if you bring in a floating dock into the country, it should cover it. But let's make one thing very, very clear to all those interested, is that it's a fund for the serious-minded. It's not, a free-for-all. Anybody who has a knife should come and cut the cake or something. No. And because it is capital intensive, we want to make sure that before you benefit from it, you must have a proper business plan that is going to convince not just Nimasa, at the same time our other financiers like the bankers.
In respect of shipping development, the administration of Nimasa DG Ziakede Patrick Akpoblokemi has thus far pursued in equal measure a clearly defined strategy to give indigenous ship owners total control of trade along the country's waterways, as well as a stronger stake in the country's import and export trade. The Cabotage Department of Nimasa recommends to its partnering primary lending institutions or PLIs the names of deserving beneficiaries of the CVFF program. These include Diamond Bank, Fidelity Bank, Sky Bank and Sterling Bank. El Yakub Hassan is the Deputy Director in the Cabotage Department of Nimasa. He speaks on the modalities for selecting the beneficiaries of the CVFF scheme, as well as steps put in place by Nimasa to insulate the process of selection from abuse.
2 points of view. We have the statutory criteria. You must be an indigenous company, 100% for you to access the fund or to be considered at all as a potential beneficiary to the fund. So it's a statutory requirement in line with the Act and the guidelines and the CVFF guidelines. Now, along that line, there is this issue of credit rating, because we are doing this thing, as I said, in conjunction with the PLIs. So they do the assessment, they assess the applicant along the credit rating to see that whether they are capable of repaying the loan. Yes, because the fund is structured in such a way that Nimasa will give 50%, while the PLIs will give 35%, while the applicants will contribute 50% equity as equity contribution.
He also spoke on the issue of waivers.
Now, with the advent of cabotage and the introduction of which provides for waivers, meaning that where we do not have capable Nigerians to participate in, to execute certain marine contracts, you find out that the Act and the implementing guidelines provides for waivers. Applications for waivers are submitted to Nimasa, and we process the waivers and recommend them for ministerial approval. Because by virtue of Section 49 of the Cabotage Act, the responsibility of granting waiver rests entirely with the minister.
Director for Cabotage at Nimasa, C. Oruwari Etete, says the agency is actively pursuing a scheme to assist indigenous ship owners procure contracts with the international oil companies operating in Nigeria.
Their main problem is to be able to get contract, to be able to compete with the IOCs, that is the international oil organizations. So what we intend to do is to be able to see that we see how we can be able to get them contract. And by doing that is we have already told them to bring up most of their vessels. We get these vessels repaired for them under the CVFF fund. Repair the vessels and then be able to get the IOCs to tell us the specification of the kind of vessels that they want. And then we repair the vessel for them and then ensure that the IOCs are able to give them contract, so that they are going to be the first refusal once we're able to do that, so that the IOCs will ensure that they give contracts to them at every point in time, rather than the foreign owners. That doesn't mean that the foreign companies are not going to be giving contract, but at least make sure that the Nigerian indigenous ship owners are giving first refusal in whatever it is.
It is difficult to envisage a functional shipping industry in Nigeria without conscious effort at the entrenchment of the ship registration culture in the country. Nimasa is already working in this direction and believes that the best way to go about it is continuous enlightenment on the functions of its ship registry responsibilities, as well as the benefits accruing from registration of vessels in Nigeria.
This office actually is statutory creation of the law. The office is created by Section 16 of the Merchant Shipping Act 2007. This office is also referred to in the Nimasa Act, Part 8, Section 28. It's also an office that is also mentioned under the Cabotage Act. So it's a statutory creation, and basically what we do is we register vessels. Vessels owned by Nigerians. Section 17 actually states the categories of vessels we are to register: merchant ships, fishing vessels, fishing trawlers, vessels under construction, FPSOs and FSUs, and we also must have a register of vessels under license, that is vessels under 15 gross tons.
From the foregoing, it is obvious that vessels registered in Nigeria enjoy a comparative advantage under the Nimasa Cabotage scheme, which opens up doors of opportunities with international oil companies operating in the country.
Cabotage has actually reserved the domestic coastal transportation and logistics to Nigerians. So I do know quite a number of Nigerian ship owners who have very sound vessels, relatively young vessels, and they get patronized. I mean, the oil majors have no choice because of cabotage than to patronize them. Some of the incentive we're looking at is to maybe present to government, and of course now maybe through the presidential committee, which the Director General is also there, to say that look, government must grant custom duty-free importation of certain categories of vessels to rebuild our fleet, because frankly, we do not have huge vessels anymore.
Next up is the Maritime Cargo Report, and if you're tuning in for the first time, this is basically a breakdown of cargo in ships expected to berth in ports within the Lagos Palisades District this week. As always, this report is brought to us courtesy of the Shipping Development Department of Nimasa. There are 20 motor vessels awaiting berth at Lagos Palisades District this week. Of this number, there are 8 with rice on board. There are 2 vessels each conveying wheat, motor vehicles and containers, while there is 1 vessel each for fish, general cargo, fertilizer, soda ash, bulk sugar and bulk sulfur. There are also 20 motor tanker vessels awaiting berth at the Lagos Palisades District this week. 14 of this number have PMS or petrol on board. There are 3 conveying Jet A1 or aviation fuel. There are 2 with AGO or diesel on board, while 1 has butane. And now we've come to the part where we respond to your questions and react to some of your comments. This week we have 1 of each. Our first comment is coming from Yarosin all the way in Yola. And he says, I never knew what Nimasa was all about, but now I know. The program is good because it educates the public. Keep it up. Thank you very much, Yarosin. Our first and only question this week is coming from Abiola Olawale. And this person wants to know, or the question reads, Nimasa organized an exam for ratings and cadets. I just want to know when the result will be out. Thank you. And the answer to your question, Abiola, is that the results are still being processed by the consultants, at the end of which successful candidates will be contacted. You will certainly be contacted if you were successful in the exams. And from all of us here at Nimasa this week, we're wishing you good luck, Abiola. So we come to the very end of our show this week. We certainly hope that we've kept you educated and informed. Till I see you same time, same station, as always, I'm wishing you smooth sailing and bon voyage.